All right, so let's dive into this case that everybody has been talking about, the Luigi Mangione
Yeah,
case.
yeah.
You guys asked to unpack this one, and it's a wild story.
Hmm.
We're talking about this young man who seemingly had it all, wealth, prestigious education,
Hmm.
a bright future, and yet now he's accused of murder and terrorism.
And it's that jarring contrast that I think makes this case so compelling. It really forces us to look at our own assumptions about, you know, privilege, about potential, and the paths that our lives can take.
Yeah.
We have some articles here that detail Mangione's life before these accusations, the crime itself, the public's reaction to all of this. And what's really interesting to me is how much this case seems to be tapping into, I think, a deeper kind of societal unease.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with Luigi Mangione himself.
Yeah.
Before any of this happened, he was practically a poster child for success.
Right.
Gilman School, valedictorian, University of Pennsylvania, founded a video game development club, interned at the company that created Civilization.
Exactly. All signs pointed to a, brilliant future. It's not just the achievements, though. It's the context. We're talking about a family that's deeply embedded in Baltimore's elite, real estate developers, country club owners.
Oh, I.
This is someone who grew up wanting for nothing.
And that's what makes this whole turn of events even more perplexing. Mangione spent some time in Hawaii, comes back to the mainland, and suddenly there's chronic back pain surgery that doesn't help a growing sense of isolation.
Yeah, and this is where things get really interesting psychologically speaking.
Yeah.
Because how do we reconcile that picture of success with this kind of darkness that seemed to engulf him?
Right.
Was the pressure to maintain this facade of perfection just too much?
Mhm.
Did his privileged upbringing somehow contribute to his downfall?
It makes you wonder, if we sometimes overlook the struggles of those who seemingly have it all.
Hmm.
Have you ever encountered a situation where someone's outward success masks a much more complicated internal reality?
Oh yeah, more often than you might think. It's a reminder that we often only see the surface. But in Mangione's case, that internal struggle took a horrifying turn.
Yeah.
The murder of Brian Thompson, who was the CEO of UnitedHealthcare on December 4th, 2024 in New York City, this wasn't just a crime, it was a statement.
Yeah, execution-style shooting, a manifesto found at the scene. And that's where the terrorism charges come into play, which is unusual for a case like this.
Yeah, it certainly raises the question of what are the specific legal ramifications of those charges.
Right.
Prosecutors are focusing on the method and the potential to incite fear.
Right.
They're arguing that Mangione's actions were intended to send a message to terrorize not just Thompson, but the entire healthcare system.
But the defense is pushing back hard on that, calling it an overreach,
Right.
a way to prejudice the jury. They argue that this is a targeted act of violence, not an attempt to disrupt society as a whole.
Yeah.
What are the precedents for terrorism charges in cases like this?
Well, the legal definition of terrorism is complex, and there's a lot of debate about how broadly it should be applied. Okay, some legal experts argue that this case could set a dangerous precedent, potentially expanding the definition of terrorism in a way that could be used to silence dissent or target specific groups.
That's interesting. And then there's the manifesto itself.
Right.
This document isn't just a confession. It's a window into Mangione's mindset.
Yeah.
There's this seething anger towards corporate America, especially the healthcare system, was like, these parasites had it coming, are chilling.
And we can't overlook the engraved shell casings found at the crime scene.
Oh.
Words like deny, defend, and depose suggest a deliberate attempt to imbue the act with symbolism.
It's almost as if he was constructing a narrative, turning himself into a symbol.
And that's what makes his digital footprint even more fascinating, because the manifesto wasn't the only place where Mangione expressed these views. Investigators have been piecing together his online activity, and it's revealing, I think, a pattern of escalating anger and radicalization.
Okay.
Like, take his Goodreads profile, for example. He didn't just read Ted Kaczynski's manifesto. He praised it, called it prescient.
And for those who might not know, Ted Kaczynski was the Unabomber, a domestic terrorist, who targeted people he believed were responsible for advancing technology.
Right.
So we're not just talking about general discontent here. We're talking about an affinity for a figure who used violence to express his ideology.
Exactly. And that affinity seems to have manifested in Mangione's own online behavior.
Yeah.
His X feed was filled with posts railing against everything from artificial intelligence and commercial agriculture to the impact of smartphones on children,
Wow.
He was clearly drawn to these anti-establishment, anti-technology ideas.
There's even a post from October where a friend tags Mangione and asks, "Hey, are you okay?"
Right.
Seems like those closest to him noticed a shift towards something darker.
Yeah.
Do you think his online activity was a cry for help or something more calculated?
It's hard to say for certain, but it does raise the issue of online radicalization. The internet can be an echo chamber, amplifying these extreme viewpoints and connecting individuals who feel alienated or disenfranchised. Mangione may have found a community online that validated his anger and pushed him further down a dangerous path.
And this case really highlights the challenges of identifying and addressing online radicalization.
Yeah.
How do we distinguish between free speech and dangerous rhetoric? When does online anger spill over into real-world violence?
Yeah, those are questions without easy answers.
Right.
And what makes the Mangione case even more complex is the surprising level of public support he's received.
Yeah, it is strange we've got a man accused of murder and terrorism,
Right.
yet there are people rallying behind him,
Yeah.
selling merchandise with his face on it, even proclaiming him a hero.
It speaks to a growing sentiment, I think, a sense of frustration and powerlessness that many feel towards corporate greed, healthcare inequities, and the perceived erosion of individual liberties. In Mangione, some see an individual who, however misguidedly, dared to challenge those systems.
But does that justify condoning violence? Can dissatisfaction with the system ever excuse taking a human life?
That's a really difficult question.
Yeah.
While it's important to understand the underlying frustrations that fuel such support, it's crucial to condemn violence as a means of achieving change.
Right.
Governor Shapiro, for instance, has called the outpouring of support for Mangione deeply disturbing and emphasized that violence is never the answer.
He's made it clear that in a democracy, we don't settle our differences with bullets.
Exactly. It highlights, I think, the deep divisions within our society.
Yeah.
On one hand, you have those who view Mangione as a villain, a cold-blooded killer. On the other, you have those who see him as a symbol of resistance, a misguided but ultimately sympathetic figure.
And then there's the legal battle itself, which adds another layer of complexity.
Right.
Mangione's arrest was dramatic.
Yeah.
Apprehended in Altoona with a 3D printed gun and a stack of fake IDs.
It seemed like he was ready to disappear.
Yet, reports indicate he was calm, cooperative, almost detached during his arrest.
Yeah.
A stark contrast to the rage expressed in his manifesto.
His legal team is leaning into that contrast.
Bro.
They're arguing that the charges, especially the terrorism aspect, are politically motivated. That Mangione is being used as a political football.
They're pointing to comments made by Mayor Adams, who has been very vocal in his criticism of Mangione as evidence of prejudice.
Right.
They argue that the excessive media attention and public pronouncements from high-profile figures are creating a climate where a fair trial is impossible.
The media plays a powerful role in shaping public perception, and it's a valid concern.
Right.
Sensationalized coverage can easily overshadow the legal complexities and ethical considerations at the heart of a case like this.
So how do we ensure a fair trial when the court of public opinion has already seemingly reached a verdict?
That's the challenge. The justice system is designed to operate on facts and evidence, not emotions or public pressure. The role of the court is to weigh the evidence impartially and ensure due process regardless of the public sentiment surrounding the case.
And that's where things get really interesting, because how do you reconcile the principle of a fair trial with the undeniable public interest in this case?
Yeah, it feels like we're grappling with multiple narratives here. There's the narrative of Luigi Mangione, the fallen prodigy, the victim of his own privilege, maybe. Then there's the narrative of the ruthless killer driven by extremist ideology, and woven through all of it is this narrative of a society struggling with deep-seated anxieties about corporate power, healthcare inequities, and the very nature of justice.
And those narratives are often, I think, competing for dominance.
Right.
Making it really difficult to discern a clear picture of who Luigi Mangione really is.
Yeah.
Is he a product of his upbringing,
Right.
a victim of circumstance, or a calculated actor who chose violence as a means of expressing his discontent?
Well, he's pleaded not guilty, which means this is far from over.
Right.
There will be evidence presented, witnesses called expert testimony, analyze the legal process, will meticulously examine every aspect of this case.
And the media will undoubtedly be there every step of the way.
Dissecting each development, amplifying every argument.
For sure.
This case is a powder keg of social anxieties, and it's captured the public imagination in a way that few others have.
It's a reminder that the courtroom isn't the only stage where justice plays out.
Right.
Public perception matters,
Yeah.
media narratives matter, and the way we as a society choose to interpret and understand this case matters.
And that's where I think individual responsibility comes in.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to get swept up in the spectacle to form judgments based on headlines and sound bites. But this case demands a deeper level of engagement.
Mm.
It calls on us to grapple with the uncomfortable questions it raises, to challenge our own biases, and to resist the urge to simplify these complex issues into neat categories.
The Luigi Mangione case isn't just a legal battle. It's a mirror reflecting back at us the complexities and contradictions of our time.
Yeah.
It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about privilege, mental health, online radicalization, and the very nature of justice in a digital age.
It's a case that leaves us, I think, with more questions than answers.
But perhaps that's the point.
Yeah.
Perhaps the real value of this deep dive isn't in finding definitive solutions, but in prompting us to think critically, to engage in meaningful dialogue, and to approach these issues with a greater sense of nuance and understanding. So as this case continues to unfold, the question remains, what will we learn from it?
Right.
What lessons will we take away about ourselves, about our society, and about the systems we've created? That's something for you to think about as you follow this case and grapple with its complexities. Because ultimately, the Luigi Mangione case isn't just about him, it's about all of us.